Opposition is noted. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the hearings panel report to the council on the draft community housing strategy. It says 2020 to 2030, but I think we're going to hear that because we're in 2021, we're going to change the dates.
Yes.
I'd like to hand over to Councillor Galloway, who chaired the hearings panel. Thank you for that.
Kia ora and thank you. It's my pleasure as chair of the hearings panel, with support from my fellow panel members, Councillor Mel Coker and Community Board Chair Alexandra Davids, to report on the outcomes of the hearing process and the submissions received to the Council for a decision on the final form and adoption of the draft Community Housing Strategy 2021 to 2031. Council is reviewing its existing social housing strategy from 2007 because Council needs to identify the strategic roles and actions it can take to ensure sufficient social housing that is provided in Christchurch. The proposal in this draft strategy is to reframe social housing as community housing, linking and embedding it into a housing spectrum approach, and to rename the strategy as a community housing strategy. The definition of community housing can be read in point 3.3 of the report. To genuinely achieve improvement in both quality and quantity of community, and to achieve this, the Council needs to consider the current constraints of funding and the financing options. The draft strategy was widely consulted on through media, through community groups, and many were engaged with. The draft strategy was presented at several forums for housing providers and other stakeholders. 23 submissions were received, 8 from organisations, 4 from community boards, 11 from individuals, and 6 oral submissions were heard. And those points that were made in those submissions outlined in section 6 of the report. There was strong, very strong support for the strategy. Positive comments on its conception, framework and direction were recorded. One was in opposition, and that person did not believe that Council should be involved in any way in the provision of social housing. As a result of what the panel heard and read and our subsequent deliberations, changes were made to the original draft, and these can be seen through the tracked changes attached to this document. And the key issues that were addressed by the hearings panel can also be seen in section 7 of the report. So I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude to the enormous work that staff have done to present the strategy to us, but also to the community groups and individuals who took the time and are passionate about the provision of community housing in our city. And I would request that the Council accept the recommendations of the hearings panel and adopts the housing strategy 2021 to 31. I would like to invite staff to the table to answer any questions that councillors may have.
Thank you. Could I ask councillors if they got any questions? Jimmy Chen.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, staff and the hearing panel done a great job presented to us those comprehensive report. But I have 2 questions. The first one, particularly regarding to whether the hearing panel, particular focus on draft the social community housing strategy, consider those are the diversified community, and because accept the elderly and disabled, also Christchurch is a multi-ethnic, multicultural community. Whether any the 23 submission have any from the different ethnic or the cultural background make submission, because my particular concern, some of the people that would like to build up the community social housing, they can go together, particularly consider their way of life, or they can easy to cashing, and support one another. I'm not sure whether you talk about this issue or not.
Okay. Thank you, Ms Mayor. I guess at two levels. I mean, firstly, we canvassed as far and wide as we possibly could in terms of our general stakeholder, community group, interest group lists and so on and so forth. So we sought to make them all aware of what we were doing, certainly at the consultation stage, and certainly at the engagement stage we worked quite heavily and quite closely with the community housing provider sector, who are very representative and take into account diverse needs very strongly through the Te Waipununu Community Housing Providers Network. So, and who several of those members submitted on the strategy itself. And I suppose at Ms Mayor, at a certainly at a very strategic level, a conceptual level, we talk strongly about a housing adequacy approach to community housing. And some of the key things around there are being culturally appropriate, for example, in terms of access to community housing. So whilst we didn't specifically get perhaps one or two of the groups you were thinking about, Councillor Chen, we did make efforts, and we have sought to reflect those notions through the strategy's thinking.
Thank you. Sorry, second question.
Yes, please.
Regarding to the attachment E, the implementation plan, thank you, that's a very good detail. But I'm concerned that particular focus on the action and the measurement. This one probably we need to have some supporting the funding to support for the implementation. But this particular social community housing is rates neutrality. So I'm not sure where the funding come from, can support this implementation plan.
Those are challenges for Council. I mean, the strategy attempts to lay out the challenges in front of Council and chart a way forward in terms of a more broader thinking about community housing, how it integrates with the rest of the community. And we note in there that ultimately those are decisions for Council through its long-term plan. The strategy, I guess, seeks in the section under our roles will need to consider its ability and willingness to resource that. We note several actions and measures in the implementation plan about talking about a wellbeing assessment if Council wants to invest within a urban regeneration sort of thinking around social and economic impacts. So I guess the strategy is allowing Council to do that if it so wishes. So I guess that's a departure from some of the past thinking. So if Council wishes to invest more strongly, then this is just the strategy charts some direction for that.
Could I invite the Chief Executive just to say a few words on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Chen, I think it's also important to realise you will need to have a proper policy debate. You have a clear policy at this time in terms of what you will and will not do in relation to housing, and this strategy would need to be debated within that context. So clearly that will be something that you will be looking at in this coming year, not at this point in time, because obviously we will be publishing the LTP in 3 weeks' time.
The draft LTP.
The draft LTP.
And we've also got a number of our partners, well, obviously CCHL, but also OCHT working very hard on what the different models are that could in fact enable the outcome, but not impact on the rates required from our ratepayers. So, which would be, but that's a bigger piece of work, and that will take quite some time to work through, and that's outside the LTP process. Yep. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anne, would you like to move?
Yes, but before we do, we need to add a fourth recommendation, because we need to amend the dates of the community.
No, it's,
is it done?
Adopts the community housing strategy,
it's done.
helpfully titled 2021 to 2031.
Perfect. Sorry, I didn't realise it had been.
So you would like to move that?
I would love to move it, thank you.
And Sarah, you would like to second it? So I'll open it up for debate. Andrew?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the good work of the hearings panel led by Chair Anne Galloway. Community housing is an important aspect of Council's work. ensuring that there's fit-for-purpose, warm, dry housing for everyone that needs it, so that housing is available affordably to those that need it most. So I applaud the focus on what we might broadly call the housing continuum, so not only focusing on assisted rental housing, but also on affordable home ownership and how an individual might make a transition from community housing into affordable housing and then quite possibly into market housing. Paragraph 3.5 of the report sets out clearly really what the big tension is here. The ability to provide the quantity and the quality of community housing required, and in fact affordable housing required, at a time of increased need, and COVID has certainly played into that, along with a number of other matters particularly related to the housing market, but also at a time of constrained funding on the part of council and a legislative need to be upgrading the rental properties in terms of heating and ventilation, arguably something that we should be doing anyway, regardless of the need from a legislative point of view. So council definitely has a role to play in the provision of housing, but again the point is well made in this piece of work that council cannot and arguably should not do that on its own. It can do that best in partnership with others, not only the Otatahi Community Housing Trust, but also with partnerships with other housing providers across the city. So this is certainly a good piece of work. It's a big step in the right direction. I welcome the discussion that Councillor Chen raised and the Chief Executive responded to around the funding parameters for social housing. That certainly will require us to have a look at the income projections from the head lease to the Otatahi Community Housing Trust. Inevitably will involve some discussion about whether rates could correctly be used to support the social housing portfolio on either a temporary or more permanent basis, or whether the current arrangements with a good look at financial prudence are actually sufficient to deliver the quality and quantity required. I welcome that discussion, but for today, I applaud this piece of work and I'm very, very happy with the way it's been carried out.
Thank you. Any others? Jimmy Chen?
Thank you. Yeah, I support this the new revised the council the committee social housing strategy, because we review the previous one was published in 2007, so it has been for almost 14 years. But over the last 14 years, council and also city of Christchurch, we passed through so many disasters: the earthquake one, and Paul Hill, the bush, the fire, and also those most attack in 2019, and also those COVID-19 the pandemic. You know, that's quite a lot the disasters, and quite a few people even now, you know, the rental fees increase a lot, and some people short of this the housing to stay, you know, for the accommodation. So council take a lead to face this situation, you know, and integrate all those the key the housing provider. That's fantastic. Particularly, we are not only for this the new revised strategy, but also for implementation plan. But we still need to face, you know, the real situation, because at the moment, let's read the neutrality regarding to the policy. We know we need to face this new situation, how to break through, can provide sufficient resources and funding to make this strategy more practical, implementable. That's we need to know how the common goal and also how the lessons so we need to face this year. So I fully support this strategy.
Thank you. Anne Galloway?
Thank you. I think we're all aware of the enormous challenges that we face in New Zealand in terms of housing, and we have in Christchurch a waiting list of around 10,000 people waiting. It's only going to get worse, and our children and our grandchildren are going to be confronted by the housing issues that we have not had to worry about. So I hope that as a council, we can think about the future, we can think about the vision that's here, that community housing is a foundation of housing in Ōtautahi, Christchurch for all of our well-being, and start putting our minds to how we're going to address that challenge going forward. And I look forward to understanding the work that the Housing Trust and CCHL are doing around options for funding going forward, because that is going to be the key, how we're going to resource the need that we're going to have. So thank you again for the work that's been done. We appreciate it, our community appreciates it, and I look forward to your support here.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Abstention, well, we've noted the conflicts of interest, so that there is no voting from either Yanni Johansson or Phil Major as their members of the OCHT board. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. The next item is the